again, some of you weren't in the room when they were introduced before, but we have Lieutenant Colonel John Turner, who was just recently arrived back from Kenya on a mission trip. He's still awake and doing well, he says. So he's got toothpicks in his eyes there to hold them open. Then we have Major Jim McDowell. Now, Major McDowell served 3 years in Kenya. You and your wife, I believe, we were together. So he must be well rested, because Kenya means God's resting place. So after 3 years, you've got to be really rested about that. And of course, we think of Commissioners Bill and Nancy Roberts, and Nancy's on the panel here. They served as territory commanders in West Kenya. So you know how restful that was, and you enjoyed that time. And God used you in mightily in His service. Then we have here Romy Alep. Now, Romy served in Liberia. John, go to you, Romy. You know, Liberia is Latin for free. All right? And so it's Latin for free. And of course, if the Son shall set you free, you what? Shall be free indeed. And that's what the message of Liberia went out. We have also Karen Young, who is the Territorial Multicultural Department Director. And we, again, welcome you. Appreciate your time here. And then Collins Mbesi, also known as Ukana Matata Man, right? No worries with you, right? All right. So he's from the Congo. And so we have some distinguished guests with us. And so we appreciate their time and their efforts as we assemble here. Now, we've got some questions that are, canned, shall we say, but some that will come from you, and they're expecting some real good interaction here. But the first one, let's start off with one of these, and we'll ask anyone on the board on this panel that can address this issue. How is the Salvation Army in Africa different from the Salvation Army in the United States of America? In your opinion, how is it different? Anyone want to grab your mic?
For the first question, that's very easy for me because I was in Africa and I'm here in America. So in Africa, when we're talking about the Salvation Army, the first thing that comes in mind is like a church. Like here, I was one of my friends at university. He asked me what church you go to. I said to him, Salvation Army. He said, no, I mean church. I said, what are you talking about? Salvation is a church. But back home, when you mention just the name Salvation Army, it's a church. So everybody aware of it, that's a church. That's the difference, that's the first difference.
That's good. Good perception. Go ahead, Colonel.
In my limited 10-day, let me use a different microphone. This one seems to work better. In my limited 10 days in Kenya, I can see the big difference between the Salvation Army here and there is we do so little, really, with so much money, and they do so much with so little money. And what I mean, we do so little, compared to them, we do very little compared to all this resource we have. And they do an absolute everything with such little resource.
So we can move on and ask this question, and maybe someone else can jump in here. How are the African people different from us? And of course, you're talking multicultural there just on that continent alone, but of course, that's what they say is the melting pot is America as well. But how are they different from us, and how are they the same?
In Liberia, West Africa, where we were assigned, the Salvation Army there, the comrades, you can see that they love each other and that they love the Lord. Every Sunday, you can see Salvation Army churches filled with people. And when offering time comes, everybody comes to the front to give their offering to God, even little children. And as they come, they were dancing. And also, I can say, the officers in Liberia, they don't drive cars. When they go to the office, they use the public transport. I myself had the chance to ride in public transport. They call it the old taxis. And sometimes because it's filled with people, that the ladies, they don't have any more seats, they sit on my lap. That's how difficult it is with the officers in Liberia and the United States.
I'd like to get us all, interactive here and open it up to the floor. Does anyone have a question that they want to ask from the floor yet? There's one over here.
With the different cultures that, even though Africa is I guess they would have different cultures like we have here, depending on where you're at in Africa. So with the Salvation Army, do they have one standard way of running it, or do they follow more of the traditions and the cultures? Because that ever become a problem. Because I know, different beliefs and different cultures there. Or is it united as far as the Salvation Army is concerned? Oh, okay, like here we have different Salvation Armies, like Dearborn there's a Salvation Army here, there's people that's in this area that's here. Maybe in Detroit, there's a different culture that's there. Okay, but it's ran under one same division and all of it's ran. Is it similar, or do you?
We are all one army under one brand, if you want to call it a brand, yes. But there are differences, just like you mentioned here. Dearborn Heights may be just a little different than Farmington Hills or than Connor Creek. You still tend to pick up your own style of worship, depending on who is in the congregation. And we were commenting, having just come back from Nairobi, that one of the Salvation Armies, in fact, it was at one time the biggest corps in the world in Nairobi, tends to do their worship now a little bit more like we in the Western world, not completely, but it's become a little more westernized, where if you move out just 5 or 10 miles down the road and you go to one of the other corps, it's still very, very much with the culture of their area, the Kenyan culture, African culture. Does that answer it for you?
Yes.
Good question, good answer. Now I'd like us to do something that they do in Liberia. You might remember this, it's called a snap. Let's see if I got it written down here. Yeah, it's how you shake your hands there is a little bit different. The snap shake, yeah, snap shake. Remember that? Yeah. So what they do is everyone, you got a partner, just kind of, that person next to you, just grab their middle finger and move that up and down. That's basically what it is. The middle finger only, and you move it up and down. That's how their handshake. And I tell you, it's cultural because it stems from the days when the Africans, the slaves were freed in America, and they moved over to Liberia. And what their slave owners did before was break their middle finger as a sign of ownership. But now they've twisted, they've turned that, and so what they've done is now they use it, say, because they're free. And they celebrate it that way. So I thought that was very interesting. So, next, try that on your friends. Next time you want to shake their hands, just do that snap shake, okay? All right, we got some specific questions. And this is for Karen Young. How can we reach out and relate to people from cultures so different than ours?
I think one of the things that we can do is to establish relationships with people of cultures that are different than ours. I have found that people often have questions about people who are different. They may talk with their friends, they may talk with their family members, they may talk to their coworkers about them, but rarely take the steps towards actually interacting with them and building the relationship that would help them understand. So I think one of the first things that we can do is really build relationships with the other, with those people who are different than we are.
That's wonderful. And of course, what comes to my mind is the song, "We Are One in the Spirit, We Are One in the Lord." That kind of gives us an advantage, that we can share the love of Christ, and everyone responds to that. And so we got to be, cognitive of their cultural background and everything, and be respectful for certain things. But it's the love of Christ that really goes between. Commissioner Nancy Roberts, can you talk about women's roles and women's rights in Africa?
Well, only recently have the women in Kenya, I think that's what I will speak to, really begun to, or have begun to have established some rights for them. Up until 10 or 15 years ago, girls were not necessarily expected to go to school nor made to go to school. And recently the laws were made so that all children are to go to school, at least through the primary grades. That doesn't necessarily mean that they will all get to school, because many who live in the rural areas either don't have access to a school, can't afford to go to school, or kept home to work on the family farm. Up until 10 years ago, women had no rights whatsoever regarding property, and they couldn't own anything on their own. A married woman who would lose her husband would also lose everything she had because it would go to her husband's family. And in fact, she might have to go as property of her husband to the family as well to live, which caused a lot of sorrow and sadness for women. In recent years, it has been said that, or it has been done, that they can only have one, they're only supposed to marry one man, one woman. In the past, there have been multiple marriages within the families. And while there still are some who have more than one wife, the rule is one wife, which has helped to make things a little easier on the women. Women are often treated as servants more than they are respected as women in Kenya. They are expected to do a lot of things, a lot of work. They work in the fields, they carry water, they carry firewood, keeping the family going. They are strong individuals. They are loving individuals, but they haven't had the rights that they deserve. And in recent years, the Constitution has changed to give women their rights. But it's very slow in coming to all the women, especially those who live out in the bush or in the rural areas. And probably 75% of the women are located out in the bush or the rural areas. No transportation other than going to the side of the road and paying for a motorcycle perhaps to take them on into the corner store where they can buy a few things, if they even have the shillings to do that with. But they're very poor. So the rights for women are just beginning to be developed. You go into the big city of Nairobi and you will see women working, you will see women having good jobs, but they're not paid nearly what their counterparts are paid. But if you would put a woman in charge of one of the businesses, it would indeed flourish because they would know how to handle that business and do it well. They're strong women.
That's good. There's a good future ahead for them. And I'll open up to the floor again. Any other questions that someone might have? Okay.
When you were in Liberia, how much fighting did you see in the area? What influence did that have on the church? Did it keep
Can you please repeat the question?
When you're in Liberia and there's all the fighting and civil unrest that's going on, how would that affect the church? When people stay away, where they're afraid that the army might come, not Salvation Army, but the Liberian army might come and make it difficult for them to attack?
Yeah, during the Civil War, the churches closed down. And even the officers assigned went back to their own countries. And after the war, my wife and I were assigned there right after the Civil War. So we did not really know what exactly happened. We just heard that all churches were closed.
Now, I might add that, in Congo and in Collins, you would know about this, there's been conflict since the 60s where they've endured 2 decades of armed conflict. Over 5.4 million people have died due to war-related causes. Has that really had an effect on the Salvation Army and how it operates?
Yeah, it's been for a while, in Congo. First of all, let me start with this. Congo is like the first country in Africa. They have a lot of raw material. When I'm talking about raw material, I'm talking about diamond, copper, gold, and all the stuff. So, and the people, they are fighting each other in order to get those raw material. So that affects the Salvation Army because, they ask about a lot of resources because the Salvation Army has to send people over there, to make sure, like, they call, they are safe. And most of them, I remember when I was there, as Major said, they closed the court because they didn't let the officer to be there. And the officer, they came back to the big city, to Kinshasa. But it's very, very, till now, that's a problem, a big problem. Even now, the current president doesn't want to organize election because he signed a lot of contract people to, for the diamonds, copper, all that stuff. So that's a big fight in the country.
Yeah, it's a rich country, but all the people live in poverty, basically. And, there's a lot of resources there. I know that there's a lot of gold and titanium and tungsten and tin, and yet it continues to be extremely poor population. And of course, it's not getting down to the people that need it the most. And so, we'll have to pray about that and have the peace in the Congo, in Africa, all over. In fact, there's a lot of unrest. And so that the Lord will intervene because He makes the difference, doesn't He? And although they say that in Congo that there's 80% of the population are Christians, they're still there fighting amongst each other. And you think of even the percentage of Christians in Liberia, which is 84.8%, and in Kenya it's 85.5%. So there's a big influence of the Christian church. It's just having us again rally together and work together so that the love of Christ is revealed and that there is justice and for all, as we like the liberties in America. Okay, so any other questions from the floor at this time?
I'd like to ask those that have been in Africa long period of time, how has your journey affected your preaching, praise and worship? Because I know you praise and worship pretty good in Africa. How has it affected your ministry back in the U.S.?
Well, I never did dance when I was over there. People tried to get me to dance, and I could do the arms or I could do the feet, one or the other, but I couldn't do both. And so my praise and worship hasn't changed a lot, but it did have a great effect on my openness to other expressions of worship. if you've ever been, I think we heard it even today during the Congolese program, when the women do the loud, the high, voice, that took getting used to. When you're in a meeting and all of a sudden someone is kind of screeching in the meeting and whooping it up, and that was uncomfortable. It took a long time for that to kind of become normal for me, and but it opened up my whole way of thinking about worship, and just being there for 3 years to try to see the largest Salvation Army in the world in Kenya. There's got to be some secrets there, some good things that happen, and their worship was very exciting. So I didn't bring it home necessarily, like I can't do it, but it was exciting to watch.
I'll kind of ditto what Jim has said. The joy of the Lord just comes forth out of the people in Africa. And when you come home, we are very subdued. And when Bill and I first went to the Corps, when we came home, we went back out and said, back out of the Corps, and we looked at each other and we said, boy, have things changed. You just get involved in the worship. Everybody is involved in the worship when it is going on in Africa. We're not just sitting there. You actually are becoming a participant in a very, very active, joyous way. And this joy just kind of surrounds you. The singing, the dancing, the praising, the worshiping, the timbral band, whatever is going on, it just kind of grabs you and brings you in. And it is different than what we come to when we come home. Now, I'm not saying, maybe some of your churches have some of that in, because we talked about the fact there's different cultures within our churches. But I don't stand still very often when I sing anymore. I want to move. I want to sway or dance or move my feet. Now, my husband's very much like this man. But for Nancy Roberts, I'll tell you, I can't stand still. And it just made it worse going to Kenya for me, because I love to dance. So.
Well, even in our offerings, it takes about 20 minutes, I think, at least, to take up their offerings, because everyone gets involved. And I know when I was there, they had almost a little competition, because they had a number of outposts too that were there, and so it was like, who could outdo the other, and in the collection, and they did give that over, and if it didn't make enough, they passed the hat again. So there you go. So we should try that tonight.
One other thing about their meetings, when we're here in America and the meeting goes an hour 15 minutes, around 1 o'clock, make sure the preacher sees them looking at their watch. And over there it started about 10 o'clock and it went to 12:30, and it felt like it was just a few minutes. It just went real quick. And so there's this freedom, not only in the expression, but the freedom in how much time they come to worship. Many of the people walk to the Corps on Sunday, and many of them walk a good distance to get there, and they don't want to walk all that way and only come for a 1-hour meeting. So they will start the Sunday about 8 o'clock, and they'll have a prayer meeting, then they'll have breakfast, then they'll go out on open air, and then they'll come back and have a tea, then they'll start the holiness meeting, then they'll end the holiness meeting, and that's about 12:30 or 1 o'clock, and then they'll have some lunch together, and then they'll sit around and they'll praise and just sing and pray and praise for some more, and then later in the afternoon they'll head on home, because they don't want to put all that effort to go all this distance for only a 1-hour meeting. So they actually come to the Corps and they stay hours and hours, 6-7 hours when they come on Sunday. Try that at your Corps.
And I remember too the march. Boy, I don't know if it was something different, because we marched to every outpost and they came in line, and then we were out there how long, Jane? An hour marching, and down in the city streets of Nairobi, and shooing the goats away and everything else. So as we moved along, but it was quite an experience, and the joy of the Lord being expressed, and people knew that the Salvation Army, of course, was there. Our presence was known. And of course, it's the second largest church in Kenya is the Salvation Army. So it is very dynamic there. So we'll move to the next question. This is going to be Lieutenant Colonel John Turner. Were there any aha moments in your experience during the recent trip to Kenya?
I think it's in what I mentioned before, the amount of ministry that happens with such little resource. That just surprised me. They have ministry happening all the time. And as Calvin's mentioned, it's more enthusiastic about church ministry is happening. And we in America, we have so much in the way of resources. You know, you look at this building, for instance, they would never have a building something like this, never. It's a brick walls and corrugated metal roof. And there's a gap between the walls and the roof to let the ventilation. It is everything is very simple, and it's very dusty and dirty because of just the climate. But they do so much, and they are so happy with the little bit that they have. And that was just a big aha moment for me, that they are so happy with the little they have, and then they do absolutely so much with the little they have. And we really put that into proportions. You know, we look at the budgets that we have for poor here, the budgets that they have for poor there. We should have thousands of people in poor compared to what they have in their budget compared to our budget, what we should have. In fact, another aha moment for me was to find out that in order to start a corps in Kenya, or the Kenya East Territory anyway, you had to have 150 senior soldiers. Then you could start the corps. That was astounding to me. And they just lowered that, I think recently they said to like 125, but it's still, if you think about 125 senior soldiers, that means you're an outpost and you get them saved, you can make soldiers, then you can become a corps, then those into corps officers. So that was a big surprise to me that they have to actually have a corps going before they can call it a corps.
And everyone's a Rafiki there, you know? Everyone's a friend. And if you're in Christ especially, and you're all brothers and sisters, and you feel that they're very accepting. Now, you didn't mention, though, a highlight of your time there, Lieutenant Colonel, about eating ugali. Did you even have it?
No.
You wouldn't want it. It is cornmeal.
Madazis,
porridge.
I had Madazis.
Okay.
That's like a donut.
Collins, you could say, you can tell us what ugali is. You don't chew it, you swallow it, right?
Yeah, you know, but in Congo we call it, we have a different name. In Congo we call it fufu.
Yeah, fufu, right? In Liberia, Liberia they call it fufu.
Yeah, we call it fufu. Yeah, so.
That's a good name for it.
Commissioner Roberts calls it paste.
You tried it, did you get it down actually? But anyway.
You know, excuse me, there is a story behind that. I remember a couple years ago when the Eastern Michigan Band went to Ghana.
Yeah.
So on the plane, I talked to them about fufu. I said, hey, you ready for the fufu?
Yeah.
So, and then in my mind, I was thinking about the fufu in Congo. But the wife in Ghana, it was different fufu. I was very disappointed. So now, everywhere we go with the band, Tom Henderson used to diss me. What is this, fufu? So,
Well, I know they have to wash it down with some spicy soup, you know, so that it actually goes down your pelvis. Yeah, it's very interesting texture. Okay, so we're going to have Major Alep answer this question. What programs does the Salvation Army have in Liberia?
When we were there in Liberia, they have 2 middle schools, and they have special classes for the blind. They also have the William Booth Health Clinic. And during our time, most of the patients are sick with malaria. My wife had malaria 8 times when we were in Liberia. And also, we have vocational schools. When we were assigned there, I was asked to build a 3-story vocational school, concrete building. And right now, it has 500 students. The out-of-school youth goes to the Salvation Army and they learn trade so that they can work. We also have HIV, AIDS work in Liberia. When we were there, the people get water from the river, and once I went to the river, I saw the leeches, the earthworms, and all dirty things. They get their drinking water from there. So when I was there, I submit, as a project officer too, I submitted a project-wide rescue for 8 deep wells, which are now being used by the people in the community.
And of course, we know Jesus is the living water. He's the life for all mankind. Water is essential. And I remember Kibera in Kenya. What is there? Over a million people living in Kibera, the slum, and there was only 6 toilets. And well, they used the outside as the toilets. Of course, you were walking in it as you were visiting from house to house. And so it's an open sewer. And also the water, they had to walk, they had to walk a mile at least to get to a well or someplace a source of water. So don't take that for granted here in America. And praise the Lord for water. And pray for them so that they can get more water. So Major Jim McDowell, missionary service is getting a bad rap in the public forum, who sees it as imposing our values on another culture. Can you address that?
Karen kind of talked about this a little bit earlier today, if you're able to be a part of that. And that is that we all are a product of our culture, wherever that is. And we take those values and those cultural norms, we take those with us wherever we go. And so when missionaries go overseas to bring the gospel of Jesus Christ to another part of the world, they need to be really sensitive about the fact that that they're also bringing a lot of things with them that aren't the gospel of Jesus Christ, that are part of the culture, and they need to be very careful not to try to spread the culture along with the gospel. When we did a very short missionary training, like 2 weeks before we went to Kenya, and during that time we heard from other missionaries who